Welcome back to Method Cooking with David. So it's not always using with what you've got, but also what you can find. I found a 50-pound bag of onions for dirt cheap, and I want to use all of them up and get them cooked, prepped, frozen, whatever, before having to throw any into the trash. So tonight we're doing French onion soup. You can look back at one of my older videos about how to caramelize the onions for the absolute best result, but we're going to kind of do a step-by-step on onions to broth to red wine to actually put it in a bowl. So the onions have been cooking now for about 18 hours. I took the 3 pots that we started with and got them all combined into the one I like the most. We're going to cool this down, and I'm going to keep some in the fridge so I can use it here in the next day or two, and the rest is going in the freezer to use at a later date. Next step of the French onion process. We've got the caramelized onions done, and then we're going to start on making the broth. For the broth, obviously, it'd be way better and amazing if you had chicken bones and beef bones, ran both of the beef broths and beef stocks for like 48 hours, strained it off, re-wetted the bones, made other stock, combined it, this long drawn-out process. Not everyone has bones in their freezer or their fridge. So I went to my fridge. I've got a roasted chicken stock and a roasted beef stock, just kind of the base. So I'm going to mix that up with a little bit of water, splash in some red wine, bring that up to a boil so the alcohol in the wine cooks out, but that flavor remains. I'm going to mix that with the onions, and then we're ready for the final round of our soup. As the water starts to come to a simmer and a boil, I'm going to mix in the beef base and the chicken base. I'm going to do about 2/3 beef base. As the water starts to come to a simmer, I've added 2 spoonfuls of the beef base, and I'm going to do about half to maybe 1 spoonful of the chicken base. I put in maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of a cup of red wine. I used a cab for this because I think the flavor cooks and carries over really well with the onions. We're going to bring that up to a simmer so that the alcohol cooks out but the flavor remains. Then we're going to mix that with the onions, top it with some toast and some cheese, and into the broiler. With the caramelized onions hot, I'm going to cut in a little bit of that broth. I'm going to bring that back up to a simmer. And again, once you put the broth in, there's no real getting it back out. So I'm going to add a little bit, let it kind of marry up. I'm going to taste it, adjust salt, pepper, whether I need more broth, or whether I should pull some more onions out of the fridge. So we've tasted the onions, we've tasted the broth, but now that we've got them combined, we're going to give that a taste before we finalize it and go into the bowl. Broth and the onions have been combined. We've got some bread toasted off and some Havarti cheese. You can use whatever kind of cheese you want. A lot of people will use Havarti, provolone, any kind of like white melty cheese, but honestly like a smoked Gouda, Munster, whatever you've got or whatever sounds delicious. So we're going to get the soup into this ceramic dish. I would definitely recommend like a soup bowl or something ceramic so that when we put it in the oven on broil, it doesn't crack and break on you. Give that a couple ladles. On top of that, we're going to put the toast, and then finally the cheese. Obviously, if you look at it, one piece kind of covers it, but I'm a big fan of that gooey kind of over the side, pick at it cheese while you're eating. So I'm going to go with a couple extra pieces, pop them over on the sides. We're going to pop this on a sheet tray in the oven on broil for maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds, depending on how your oven works. Pop it out, and then we're ready to eat. Now that the soup is done in the oven on broil, cheese is nice and melted, I've got a plate set up. One thing I do like to do, especially with bowls of soup coming out of the oven, is with how hot the bowl is, with the broiler going, I'll put it on a plate to hold, but I'll put down a wet piece of paper towel so it doesn't slide around on that plate. So I'm going to come over with that dish of the soup and the cheese, all melted. There's the bread, spoon ready to go. And there you have it, French onion soup. French onion soup is done, plated, bowled, as it were, and ready to eat. A couple things to think about when you're making French onion soup. I use white and yellow onions, but don't feel any hesitation to throw in some red, green onions, whatever you can come up with and have. And as far as the bread and cheese on top, I had some leftover hard rolls, but if you had any sort of white bread, leftover, I don't know, cornbread if you wanted to. Even some croutons sprinkled over the top if you don't have bread or the energy to make toast. But with the caramelized onion sitting in the freezer, you could have this dish ready in probably 5 to 7 minutes. And the cheese over top is totally either what you have on hand or what tastes good. So, Thank you for tuning in. Like it, love it, share it. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next week.